The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity, Chris Schmidt, portal expert, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. Can find Elijah on Twitter at Herbelessence, at Schmidt_radio. Hope you're well, as it is Championship Saturday. What a sprint it's been. It wasn't that long ago, guys. We were kicking off week one. Now it's the final week of college football before bowl announcements, before playoff seedings, before the rest of the college football world comes crashing to an end when your favorite running back, wide receiver, left tackle, name it, goes into the portal. In the midst of all this, there was signing day Wednesday, Nebraska getting another top 20 class. And in the midst of this week, you sign some more dudes that it sounds like can come in and maybe help out. You've got a couple of different rosters per Matt Rule's breakdown. Your 53-man roster that's ready to go and your 53-man roster that's there to develop. And oh, yeah, Dana Holgerson is here to stay. And Tony White is down to Florida State along with Coach Knighton.
This is all in the last week, by the way.
No, and Garrett McGuire is off to
it's crazy.
Texas Tech. We'll get to your comments. We'll say what's up to the starting five and beyond, as we always appreciate you for hanging out with Hail Varsity Weekend Edition. Hail Varsity YouTube is where you can like and subscribe. We invite you to do that. Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter, KFOR, Facebook, and Twitter. And Kraynak, Elijah, it's been just nuts this week.
Yeah.
One more portal entrant from last night for Nebraska football, Davon Hall, really talented in-state dude out of Bell West, is off to the portal. The punch below the belt, so that's maybe not that big a surprise, but it still stings, is Emmett Johnson on what was that? Thursday night? Yeah, Thursday night. So there's that. But you get a Dawson Merritt, a Jeremiah Jones, Cortez Mills, Malcolm Simpson, Mosey, 6 of the 7 top in-state players as part of your recruiting class. So some wins and some losses, Kraynak, this week for the Big Red.
You forgot to mention that the whole D-line and linebacker crew is transferring out. Right? I mean,
no, not yet.
Yeah, you forgot to mention that, right? Jamari Butler, Prince Will, Uman Yellen.
Well, right.
Yeah,
Can I be very frank with you? When I think of the D-line crew, to me, I think of I think of McGahee. All right, I think of Van Poppel.
Yep.
I think of Keona Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Those are guys that I would be nervous about. Not that I have any inside info. Those are the guys I don't want to lose at any cost for Nebraska on the defensive line. The other guys that transferred out, it's not good, but you can manage, I think, comparatively. If I have to pick who I want and who I got to let go, because there's going to be 35, 40 more guys, you got to get down to 105. You're going to lose people.
The question,
I think this is Chris bargaining. You reached the bargaining
what
stage.
It is, brother.
The question moving forward, Mark, in the portal era, to me, is: are you losing any foundational pieces of your program? Guys that you want to build your offense or defense around for the next 3 to 4 years, and those are kind of the guys that Schmidt has laid out.
And Shavers is a foundational guy at linebacker.
But Prince Will, no.
I think McGahee passed him
as the season went on.
I mean, I hear you.
You don't like
devil's advocate.
You don't like it because
he's only a second-year guy. He just played 2 years.
Right. But he's going into his third year.
Right.
He's got some upside. He's got a ton of twitch. He's talented. He's flashed. I'm not saying it. Well, it is a big deal. I mean,
according to one of the services, he is the highest-ranked defensive lineman in the portal.
Uh-huh.
The highest ranked, like number one. Like you look at the list, defensive lineman, Prince Will Umanmielen, Nebraska, leaving.
Right. But
Not great.
How did his snap count go?
It really went down. Yeah.
As the year went on.
That's one of the things that's making me wonder too, with Terrence Knighton leaving, right? Is like some of the guys that are leaving, like you could understand, hey, maybe they didn't like their snaps, maybe they didn't like their playing time. It's like, well, that was one of the coaches that dictated that. So are they following him? It's just like that whole thing's leaving now. So if you were just like, I didn't like my snaps, like, well, the D coordinator and the D lineman are going. So you also wonder, are some of these leverage plays just to, get a little more NIL? Is Nebraska, whoever the new defensive coordinator is going to be, whether that's Butler or whoever, are they upset about some of these? I would think Bayer. I don't think you want to lose Bayer.
No, Bayer was fun. He was talented. He was good, but I think a lot of these guys want to go play for Tony.
Could be. But you're right. In terms of production this year, no, you're not losing a lot. That's true. Emmett Johnson, that
hurts.
Right?
It hurts until it doesn't.
Yeah, well, right. Exactly. And there are plenty of other backs out there, of course, but it's been it's unnerving though. It's hard for me to imagine that. I mean, everything that you just mentioned, Chris, you mentioned a lot of important headline-worthy stuff that if this were 2 years ago, any one of those things could have driven an entire show, right? Any one of those things that you mentioned, Tony White leaving, right? Terrence Knighton, recruiting class. Remember those? Remember when people cared about recruiting classes? But now it's just like, okay, so those are the 20 names and half of those guys will be in the portal next year anyways. Like, okay. But I mean, seriously, it's like, great. You signed, for one moment in time, you had a top 20 class and then 10 of them left a year later. Okay, great. What does that mean? So every single thing you mentioned, there was so much news just in the past week that you didn't even get to. And I wasn't saying it to criticize you. I'm just saying that's how much crap happened.
Criticize away, baby.
No, but I wasn't. I wasn't. I was just like, you forgot to mention this, and there's probably some other crap we forgot to mention too. Probably. Just because it's such a dizzying pace, and especially y'all doing a show every day. The show wrote itself every day, didn't it? I mean, it was just like, well.
And let us be honest, it was great writing.
Right. Like, you don't even have to prepare anymore. Just wait for what happens about who's going to put out their latest. It's been great to be a part, no space, of this program. And now we're heading on to, I want to be a part, no space, of another program.
And one of the kind of difficult parts about this week, because as you talked about, Mark, it's whirlwind, all these things are happening, and you can't truly evaluate some of the losses until you know the replacements. Because as you move closer and closer to an NFL model, what this week kind of was, not the best comparison, but what you can kind of compare it to is an NFL team that was expected to go win the division. They fall short of expectations. They miss the playoffs, and they trade their talent for draft capital and say, you know what, we're going to start afresh in the spring. The difference being the draft capital that you're going for is in the NFL, you're getting rookies. In college football, you go to the portal and you are finding, at least the goal being, guys that have played elsewhere that you're going to try to find a bigger role for, or whatever it may be, a better fit within your team. That's kind of what the comparison is this week for me. So like when the NFL team blows it up because it's not working and go get a whole bunch of draft capital, the fans are like, oh my God, the sky is falling. What's going on? You can't truly evaluate it till you know what that next draft looks like. And that's kind of where you're at with Husker football is once the portal opens and once the coaching staff is filled out, what do things look like? And that's what you're going to have to wait for before you can truly evaluate, was this last week a disaster or was this last week needed?
Yeah, and it's going to be a while before you really know. And it might take all the way up until the summer. I mean, look how late Sierra Wright came into the mix. And if you're going to name a last half of the year defensive MVP,
boom,
not named Ty Robinson, let's go with Sierra Wright, right? Like, who else are you taking? I mean, that was the dude. That dude, he was a huge difference maker, and you didn't even know about him until what was that, June? When he became a part of the program? July. I wonder if it will settle at some point. Like the portal's new, it's shiny. A lot of people are doing it's about 25%. There it is. 20,000 players in the portal, 4,500 roster spots. That might be an exaggeration.
I don't know if it is. That's the reality with the roster limits.
Would that be all levels? Because there's not even that many people on rosters. If you take 130, there's there's basically 1,300 players, period, in D1, or 15,000, 15,000 or so players total on D1 rosters. So 20 is maybe a little steep.
I'm sick that you got to shave the roster down to 105. I don't like that. I don't like the grass is greener approach, and I'm not a curmudgeon with the fact that the players need to get taken care of better.
No,
comparatively speaking, with most of their life or the years of college football in the NCAA, but the NCAA has been ducking and covering for a while here, just to stay out of court. And that's their strategy, and it's led to major upheaval with programs. And you hope you have a high level organizer as your head coach, a CEO type, which you do if you're Nebraska, and you need to go be better and have head coaches on both sides of the football now. Right. And you have that in Dana Holgerson that you inked for 2 years, who brought Shorts with him. And Shorts is a top 30 recruiter.
Talking the wide receivers coach out of Kentucky.
So you upgraded your staff there.
Yep.
And now go find a killer defensive coordinator that you may or may not know. I mean, you have both examples that can come in and be as good or better as White. And the dream, I think, for a lot of Nebraska football fans is to have an offense that is humming along, a defense that's pretty good, and a special teams unit that's not harmful to itself, and go play good football and go win some close ball games, but maybe go win some ball games that don't have to be so close, because it's not just one side of the football doing all the work. We saw Mike's post. Let's get some of our starting five shout outs before we get to Brandon Vogel. Justin Old Boots in. Rick checks in as well. Rick saying 30-year Matt rule is going to be awesome. GBR, baby. 3-putt is here. You also have Tiger Shark is in. Good to have you, Tiger Shark. Patrick, NASCAR. Eric, what's up, dude? Walter, still not a fan of Ed Foley. Tuck is here. We have part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Brian Snitley is in. Eat Beef, good to have you. And you, Grandpa, says good morning. Red Knight 79 says, how will the portal hit us today? Uncle Larry's in. Jeff Snitley in. Shane is here. Dion, good to have you, Dion. Funky Giblets is in. And Kobe says, what's up? The other Dave is here. Bob is in. We'll get to more of your comments. Adam says, what's up? And some rumors floating around yesterday that were not so nice. We didn't really get into on yesterday's show. EJ is a big loss. Richard checks in. Stank Nooner is here. Brandon Vogel is here. Go ahead.
You briefly brought up the rumors. I do want to say, whenever the person who instigates those rumors, that might be the best term to use here. Whenever he does not stand by those rumors and takes them down, I think that says a lot. So
yeah. Okay.
The rumor is Brandon Vogel has an amazing collection of baseball caps and is awesome at football coverage with Connor Reed.
That's not
volleyball. That is true. That is proven every Saturday.
Yeah, we have visual evidence.
Yes, we do. How we doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys?
We're all right.
Hey,
it's Saturday at 8:05 Central Time, and so far the portal is not hurt yet today. Nebraska football.
Hey, that's a good start.
Yeah. Hey, how about, by the way, Nebraska's recruiting class? You know, they come out with like a different motto or theme for each recruiting class. This one I appreciated. 2-5 crew, which made me think, what's your favorite 2 Live Crew song, Brandon?
Oh, wow.
And will you sing it for us? Actually, well, we can. We're not on the air. It's fine.
No, we really can't because
as Chris and Elijah have lived this week with my voice on Monday and on Thursday, I think it's better. Confirmed better.
Yeah, you're good.
We're better today, but still not singing voice ready.
You just sound more emotional right now with your voice like that.
Yeah. You sound like the week's been for Nebraska football fans. I love it.
Yeah, I haven't heard Rule speak in a little bit. He might sound like this too. Yeah, I also appreciated the 2-5 crew, and I was trying to think like, okay, how do we work some 2 Live Crew into this? And there's not a lot of outs there, so I'll go with Band in the USA as my favorite 2 Live Crew song.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, that there was two Live Crew. Two Live Crew attained fame despite they never got any radio fame because their entire radio track would have just been bleeps. So
actually, Band in the USA was their top 40.
Okay. Sorry.
No, but that's okay.
Thanks for fact checking me.
No, I just remember it because
2 Live Crew expert over here.
Tried to make an argument with my my folks when we went to Best Buy. I guess it's a free shout out Saturday. Yeah. I wanted the CD.
Hey, it's a small business. It's a small business. That's good.
And they had heard of 2 Live Crew and said absolutely not. So I had to dub it off a buddy's CD for a mixtape. That's how you got around that. Vogues, did you suffer the same fate?
Oh, yeah. My first 2 Live Crew exposure was one of my classmates' older brother.
Yes,
had the tape, and somehow he snuck it away. And that it was on a field trip. Definitely got passed around through the Walkmans, so everyone could experience a bit more of the world than they had to that point.
Little Sony foam headphone listen of like, oh my goodness, what did he? Oh, I don't even know
what's
that
in
means.
Your backpack.
Extra I don't even know what that means, but it sounds bad. Wow. Yeah. Speaking of mixtapes, there's a lot of players that are putting together their mixtapes for their next gig. In 2023, it was something like 2,700 players, which amounted to approximately a quarter of all players being in the portal, and all signs are pointing to that being the case this year, maybe even more. Brandon, Chris just rattled off all the news that happened in the last week, right? Just in the last week. And each one of those things could have driven an entire week's worth of shows a couple years ago. Out of all the things that happened since last week, what stands out as the most consequential, the most relevant, the most important move, good or bad, for Nebraska over the last week?
Yeah, so there are two that come immediately to mind. I would say so far the biggest one is the tandem of Williams and Umamulin. Those guys weren't every down players, but they were pass rush specialists. And if you go by the PFF numbers, they were both top 40 in terms of pass rush win rate. That's a rare skill in the portal. So, and Nebraska doesn't have I like somebody like McGahee quite a bit, and he gives you an option at that kind of edge spot or jack linebacker spot where you're also losing MJ Sherman. As a true freshman, now granted it was a true freshman, his pass rush numbers weren't that. So Nebraska needs to pass rush is an elite skill that you need, that good teams have. Nebraska's going to have to find that some way. Maybe it thinks it has more on the roster than is obvious to us because it's going to come from a lot of players most of us have seen little to nothing from. So that's something when you look towards Nebraska being a buyer in the portal that I think is near the top of the list of needs. The Emmett Johnson departure is, plus Ramirez out of eligibility. Gabe Irvin's gone. That's another one where they've got a couple of young guys that we don't know much about to this point in terms of on-field college production. And you've got Dowdell. The notable thing about running back so far, and this might change as we get a little bit closer to the portal actually opening, there's not a ton of running backs in there yet. So that's one where I think the skills are more readily available. Like your chances of landing the running back you need, whether it's for depth, whether it's for top line talent, are certainly better than it is at edge rusher. But yeah, I mean, they've got one proven running back on the roster at this point coming back. At least that's the way it looks for now. So those two departures, I think, are the biggest ones so far in my mind for Nebraska.
Whenever you look at those two spots, though, Vogel, Nebraska, I think they really like what they're bringing in Jamarian Parker from a running back point of view. I think they really, really like what they're bringing in from Dawson Merritt from an edge rushing point of view. Is that just a reality of the new college football? Is that you're going to need to have multiple true freshmen step up and play big snaps for you next year because of what you have with roster limits, the transfer portal, and the fact that if you do keep a very talented guy redshirted and on the bench, there's a real chance that they could be gone at the end of the year because they're always looking for playing time. I mean, it's kind of what Deion Sanders said a little over a month ago, saying with his recruiting strategy, like, I'm going to go find freshmen that play for you immediately because the reality of the matter is within 12 months of your recruiting class, 50% of those guys are going to be gone off your team most likely because of how the portal works and how roster limits are going to change college football. Is that just the reality? You need true freshmen to step up and make plays for you?
Yes. So a year ago in January, I wrote a piece saying I thought Nebraska basically won roster season. They got some key guys to come back. The departures were relatively few. And I thought selectively the additions they made in the portal in that first window really helped. Guys like Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, players that played, important roles, maybe didn't have huge seasons, but played important roles this year. I'm not sure you can win roster season in this new era the way that Nebraska did just 11 months ago. It's almost like I'm kind of approaching this offseason as like, unless you're like an Ohio State, a Texas, where it's clear people are going to kind of line up to go there and be a transfer portal destination. Everybody else, I'm almost like, you've got to throw out all of the old ways we used to try and assess what teams were going to be in the offseason, because it's way more random. And I mean, I think we saw it a little bit with just the teams that are in playoff contention this year. We're talking Iowa State, Arizona State, SMU is probably going to make it. All of these things, like, it's almost like the rule tenure starts over, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but that's kind of what it feels like. And it kind of feels like, let's get to January and assess the roster then. We'll see what Nebraska has. We'll see what they've added, which isn't a ton of fun, but that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
And to me, real quick, your development has got to be accelerated, and I don't know if that's possible on your line to scrimmage. I think on the offensive line, I think you can find some guys defensively, okay, that can come in off the edge, like we've touched on, like Prince Will, like McGahee, even a Lenhart. I mean, those guys played well as freshmen. They weren't overmatched physically, but we have not seen it go well for young guys come in as true freshmen, or even in some instances, redshirt freshmen, and be consistent or physical enough on the offensive line. I thought Gunnar Gatula played well, wasn't perfect, but played well. But he's a 2-year guy that came in and stepped up. Seaton for Colorado's that high-level 5-star tackle they got that played pretty well this year for Colorado, but there's not a ton of those dudes roaming the earth. So your accelerated development's a real thing, Vogues, on the offensive line. That's what I worry about. You don't want to lose guys after you put lab time in with them for 2-3 years.
Yeah, and you're going to need 10 of them at least. Like, that's the other thing that I think adds to the randomness we saw in college football this year, and what I think's to come is like a lot of it. I mean, this has always been true to a degree, but we're really seeing it now with the portal, where say, your redshirt sophomore guard who you really like might seek better opportunity somewhere. And oh, by the way, like big time programs lose starting offensive linemen. O-line health has made a huge difference in this college football season. When you look at, Ohio State's kind of a key example, but there are others. So how do you try to plan and account for that when it's really hard to even maintain it too deep in this current era? Like it's just crazy how different this is from like the college football all of us knew, I think, really up to this point.
Well, look at the offensive line play of a team like Boise State this season. I know everyone talks about Ashton Jeanty. Their offensive line is moving dudes too. And not to say Jeanty doesn't make plays, but it's the offensive line that's gotten them into the playoff, because Ashton Jeanty behind a bad offensive line doesn't go off for 2,400 yards in a season. Boise State, really excited to see them in the playoffs, see how they match up, because they scared the living crap out of Oregon back in September, and I'm curious to see what they can do against some top teams once they kind of ran through their schedule. Another great performance from Jeanty last night, by the way.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, and that's another program that's interesting. They've kind of existed off in their own kind of bubble, and done it at the highest level you can. Is that a place where all of a sudden, like, high performing offensive linemen are like, yeah, this Boise State's great, love the blue turf, but I might want to go see what the Big Ten or SEC is about. Because that's something we didn't see a lot with Boise State. That was one of their key advantages, is like, if you came there and they like bought into you, you were going to win a lot of games, and you could just kind of be there a little bit under the radar, but with a very good chance to get on the radar based on their success.
What does all this do also for Matt Rule, who went on the record of saying, hey, we want to be a developmental program, right? And you see in those little glimpses that we get in the Chasing 3 videos where he does appear to be, delivering certain messages, building on top of them, kind of taking players through an entire sort of learning journey to try to imprint on them. But when that roster keeps turning over, as often as it does, is the concept of being a developmental program. Is that even a realistic thing?
Can you be one anymore
in today's climate?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say it's like roads closed on that yet, but it feels pretty close. And at the very least, the timeline for that development is sped up, and maybe the better way to look at it is it's more of you've got to be an evaluation program. So kind of to Chris's earlier point, you've got to find those guys, those 25 guys or 20 guys you signed in this class, and be like, all of these guys, maybe not all of them, you'll take a couple swings some places, but like half of this class at least needs to be able to contribute right away, because you're going to need that. They need that from this 2025 class. And then in the portal piece of it, you've got to be really good in terms of evaluating, not just is this player good, but can this player come in and kind of assimilate to whatever it is we already have? Because I think that's the real key. Like Sierra Wright is a good example. And I don't know much about what happened in terms of like behind the scenes stuff, but he was a nice player from a big time program who had gotten benched the season before this one, came in, and for whatever reason, like it all worked. Like it was the right fit. He had the right mindset and mentality, and didn't even see the field early. And once he got his chance, he looked like a clear Big Ten starter. You got to be right on those two as a lot when you're trying to pick players from the portal.
And when you look at the portal evaluation since Matt Rule's taken over, I think you have Sierra Wright, Ben Scott, and then everybody else. Ben Scott and Sierra Wright both came in, made an impact. You had some other guys that played fine. Like Jamal Banks was probably better than what you had at wide receiver, but was he what you wanted? Not necessarily. MJ Sherman was good, but not great. Naor, I think, is going to be defined by a couple of bad drops in perimeter blocking. Like, I don't know. It's kind of Sierra Wright, Ben Scott, and then what other transfer portal additions have lived up to what Nebraska's needed them to be.
And you're kind of hot and cold on Dowdell. You love the upside, but you wish that there would have been some more broken tackles at that second level, right? So
the broken arm was nice, but
one more time.
The broken arm was nice.
Well, that was that was
a chef's kiss, but
that was great. But yeah, Nebraska's got to be better and right about the evaluation factor here, and I think the guy who's been pretty good at talent evaluating in his career, at least on the offensive side, has been Dana Holgerson. And that's great. And, defensively, Nebraska, with the young guys they played, they seem to be, even though there's some of the guys in the portal, but it seemed like the young guys have been pretty decent hits out of high school, right? You've gotten production from some of the high school kids, and the fourth and fifth year guys that are now sixth year guys have played their best football as well. The Ty Robinsons, Nash Hutmakers. I know he was dinged a little bit this year, but Bayer. I mean, so you've seen better production with this staff, but when it comes to portal evaluation, that's gotta jump for the Big Red.
Yeah, without going through the list, I would guess that Nebraska is probably about 500, maybe a little bit above in terms of portal. Like, MJ Sherman, big time he was a key contributor for 2 seasons. Like, I think that's a win, but it's a mild win with Banks and Naor in this past class. Like, and this is not a criticism of Raiola at all. I think it's just what Nebraska chose to live with a true freshman quarterback. Like, do they have seasons that are closer to what you maybe expected? If, say, Kyle McCord, if that's how they chose to play this, I think they probably have slightly better, but not massively so. And you're kind of maybe Sierra Wright is that guy so far, and Ben Scott, like, that was exactly what you hoped you were getting, is like a starting center, and he was that for 2 seasons. So it's been a mixed bag so far, and Rule kind of alluded to it during his signing day press conference. Like, I think the swings are going to get a little bit bigger for Nebraska in the portal, which is fun, but you need to make contact still. So that'll be the key thing.
So let's also look at making sure that we're not ignoring signs, right? With Riley and, with what happened with Mark Banker and bringing in Diaco, there were several signs of discord and not all is right behind the scenes, right? And that turned out to be true, and the whole thing fell apart. Scott Frost, there were plenty of times where you heard the coaches on his own staff directly contradicting things that he would say in the media, and there were clear signs that things were not quite right. We just finished up year 2 of Matt Rule. His D coordinator bounces. His defensive line coach, who is a quote-unquote Rule guy, bounces. His wide receiver coach that he hired, giving the guy his first D1 job, he's taken off. So this kind of Satterfield, obviously, probably going to leave. If not, he's going to have a marginalized role. Are we missing something? Was there discord among the staff this year? Does Rule have control of the program like he needs to have? Or are we just kind of conveniently overlooking some stuff as like, oh, it's portal era, oh, it's crazy? Or should we be concerned about some of this?
I think you had too many voices on the defensive side of the ball. As a result, you had guys leave.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable explanation for what we've seen there. Offensively, I feel like, Rule made the play with Satterfield and the type of offense they tried to run that he's made at his previous stops. And I think we were finding in the Big Ten, it wasn't quite holding up the same way it had at those previous places. And, to his credit, like he went out and in season tried to fix that and then secured that as kind of the new direction. Who knows if it'll end up being right or not. But I think to your overall point, Mark, like it's a very murky time for Nebraska here at the end of year 2 for Matt Rule. They got one win better, but I don't think most people, when you ask them to look beyond just the record of like, well, was this like the classic step 2 for a rule rebuild? I don't think that it was. So it's more confusing in that regard. So yeah, I think, and again, this kind of goes back to the unique time that we're in college football. Like some of these signs would be pretty, they'd be harder to put to the side if it didn't feel like so much was changing. And I'm not saying that explains it away. It just creates more uncertainty, I think, at least for me, in terms of what we're actually seeing. And is like just asking, is this an actual concern or is this just kind of a byproduct of a new era dawning?
It's Brandon Vogel with us here, a weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, before we wind it down and get you out, we do need to talk about the absolute domination that was Husker Volleyball last night. Set 1, set 2, not even close. I think maybe Florida A&M can have a, what would you call it, a moral victory about set 3, being able to put up, I think, was it 17 points? Just your reaction. It wasn't necessarily unexpected. Husker Volleyball, as I said yesterday on our show, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. They're going to make it out of the first round and make it to the round of 32. What's your thoughts on the performance last night and the path forward for Husker Volleyball as they chase another national championship?
Yeah, I don't know that I can remember a 25-3. So, for that to be out of the gates kind of told you, I think, what you were dealing with there. And, Florida A&M, good program for what it is and what it normally plays, but it's just a program that, Nebraska and the Big Ten and the SEC and the power conferences are at a completely different level. So Nebraska went out and handled that the way that it looked like it should. Today it'll be a little bit tougher. This Miami team's beaten some programs, and I think Nebraska's going to have to work in this one.
Mm-hmm. Has there ever been a 25-0 before? Like 25-3, I was just like, is that a record? I've just never seen that score ever.
I was thinking about that this morning too. I'm sure there's probably been a 25-0 somewhere where like a team had to drop out of a, early September tournament and got replaced by the local NAIA team or something. But I don't think I've seen one.
Yeah. I know we had this conversation probably about a month ago now. Whenever you look at the side of the bracket Nebraska's on, obviously they're going to have to make it through likely Wisconsin, if not maybe Arizona State. Like there's some all right teams, but it still feels like Final Four is kind of the baseline expectation because you already got Wisconsin twice. You already got Arizona State once this year. Like, is it still kind of national championship or bust with this team in that anything short of at least playing in that final match is going to feel like a disappointment? Because it's just with everything, the winning streak with this volleyball team, how hot they've been, how the tournament sets up for them, it just kind of feels like, man, this team needs to at least be playing in a Final Four, if not the national championship.
Yeah, I think certainly you would expect to see Nebraska and Louisville. So for that final weekend, and depending on opponent you get there and what that looks like and what that match would look like, I don't know that not making the championship match would feel like an outright failure, but it would feel disappointing for a team that's lost 2 matches this year, and has played at such a high level and hasn't just, won all of those matches, but it's really dominated most of them. There haven't been a lot of off nights for Nebraska other than the two matches that they lost. So we'll see, if it ends up being Nebraska, Wisconsin for a trip to Louisville, like you worry a little bit about that one. It's a cliche, but like beating a team like that 3 times is difficult. And if Nebraska does do that, if that ends up being the matchup, they probably go to the Final Four with a little bit of an extra tailwind, at least in my mind, because that would be another pretty good marker of quality.
Right at Vogel, counterread.com. Vogues, what can folks find with Counter Read? How do they get signed up?
Yeah, you just head to counterread.com. It's twice weekly Substack newsletter from myself and Aaron Sorensen. We'll have recap on Monday from volleyball, and I don't know. You think we can get through the weekend with no football news? Probably not. So there'll be some football.
I don't think we can get through the show.
That's true. Well, maybe I should check Twitter before I even say that. So it's gonna be a busy December in terms of the volleyball, basketball, football roster, and by the way, some bowl prep, and we'll learn Nebraska's destination tomorrow. So that'll be fun as well.
Good enough. Vogues, appreciate you. Take care, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brandon.
Back to the bourbon. We say hi to the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp.
And we go back to an older comment from Tuck.
I was just gonna say, I was looking for that one. It's time to play. What head covering will Gary Sharpie have on today?
I think everyone's a loser. No head covering.
No, I just got out of bed. It's 6:30 where I'm at.
You're out west. God love you.
Yeah.
God love you.
Is that one of those filters where you are wearing a hat, but it looks like you're not?
No, I'm not wearing
Like
a hat.
snap filter?
No, I'm not wearing a hat. I have one forehead, and fortunately, I can just get out of bed and get on with you guys.
God bless you, Gary.
Yeah, you're
Hey,
good stuff.
thank you, Elijah. I didn't take you as a religious guy, but I appreciate that.
God bless.
Gary, did you get my mixtape? I sent it to you. I was just wondering if there was a chance.
Yeah, you know what? There's been a lot of stuff going on this week. I will try and get to it, and I'll try and determine the value of it.
Well, as we were talking earlier, it's too live crew inspired from Mark.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
do y'all offer a 401k? Or...
well, you know what? If you just wait a little bit, I'll look at it, and if I like you, we can do some revenue sharing, and I might have to sign you to a 2 or 3 year contract.
Yeah, I'm in the portal, so you know.
Good enough.
Wow.
Sharpie, I want to ask portal approach for Nebraska. Do you continue to look at guys that were backups or high-profile recruits that maybe didn't last at an A&M, a Georgia, a Texas, SEC, Power 4, or do you look at the Indiana blueprint where the James Madison crew and SIG came in and they're playoff bound? What's the best route here to equal wins moving forward? Because you got to be right in the portal moving forward.
Yes. So, it helps to have guys that join your program that have connections. Rule didn't have that advantage when he came. He couldn't bring Christian McCaffrey or anybody from the Carolina Panthers. So hiring a wide receiver coach, there's a couple of good wide receivers for Kentucky that are in the portal. One in particular, the key kid that I think Nebraska could make a serious run on. I think let me turn this back to you guys about the portal, because Nebraska doesn't get to where they want to go next year with portal guys. They get with the guys that are on campus if they take the next step. Because I look at that, and I know the portal is going to be sexy next week, and Nebraska will have a couple of wins. But what gives you any faith over the last 2 portal cycles that Nebraska football is going to get a guy that's going to be a difference maker and not just a supplement?
Yeah, we were talking about that. Like Sierra Wright, you would have to mark as a win.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to say that Ben Scott being a multi-year starter at center would be another legitimate win. But outside of that, there's a lot of asterisk guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of, man, I missed on that guy, or that guy was just a nice complimentary piece. Yeah. Nebraska needs to be done with complimentary pieces. Where they want to go, they gotta have some dudes, some NFL dudes. And even though, we try and figure out what Nebraska's NIL structure is like, it's still vitally important, and it was reiterated this week, Nebraska football is going to be built on high school recruiting, evaluation, and development. And then when you dabble in the portal, those supplemental guys, they can fit right in, and we don't have this discussion about, well, Nebraska really hasn't hit any home runs. They have a couple of big misses on offense. That's what the weird dynamic, guys, of this football program is. The vibe on offense compared to defense in the first 2 years. Like, the hires on defense were pretty good. The hires on offense, and I'm not included Donnie Raiola because he was a retention, are really a mess. Yeah. So you look at the misses on offense, Jeff Sims was a monster miss. Now, it allowed you to get Dylan Raiola, no doubt. But then you look this past year, Banks and Nair, if we would have gone back to our shows we did in February, March, and April, and now we talk about those two wide receivers in December, the conversation is quite different, isn't it, guys?
Mm-hmm. You know, so far from that
versus what's reality, yeah.
I was just saying, so far from that 24 class, it looks like you only got 2 high school guys that have declared for the portal, Davon Hall and Danny
who should have never come to Nebraska.
Yeah. So it's just those 2 so far. You'll see if there's more, but we were talking about that too, Gary. Like, you can still be, it sounds like you're of the mind that you can be a developmental program in today's constantly shifting, everybody's leaving, 25% of all players are portaling era.
Development, and you win. People want to be part of a winning program. You know, if they're being developed and maybe they're a backup, but they see a path and there's a plan and they built a relationship with the head coach and the position coach, but they're winning, I think guys are more likely to stick around. But the one scary thing here, it's unfortunate, is your window of development probably has been shrunk. What would you say, guys? 2 years?
Yeah.
If you don't flash in your first 2 years, then it's probably time for the school to look elsewhere and for you to look elsewhere.
It's accelerated, and that's a little bit scary on the lines of scrimmage, to be honest.
Because look at, there was a stretch of the Nick Gates era on offensive line where there were some guys, because of Nebraska's failures at roster management, there were offensive linemen that had to play way too early, and they never recovered. And so then we're in this cycle of, Nebraska can't find that big-time NFL lineman because they didn't put the roster together well during the Frost era on that position, or they had a lot of misses that you had to play guys that physically and mentally just weren't ready to play.
Sharpie, I want to get your take on the name that's out there, Phil Simpson, right? Nebraska needs to make an addition on the defensive side. It sounds like Phil Simpson's a guy that could be coming back to Nebraska, was an analyst in 2023, was at Florida State this past year. And he's pretty integral in bringing that Florida talent that first year to Lincoln along with Coop. Coop, of course, it sounds like just inked with Florida State today. So Florida well, that region well, and you've been all over the Florida dudes that Nebraska's been able to sign and retain so far. Kind of a no-brainer, isn't it, to get Simpson here?
Yep, and I don't know. I think they value him as a really good coach. And remember, everybody seems to have a connection to Rule. That's why I always bring up a guy like Frank Oakham at defensive line.
Yeah, former dude.
So, there's like cross paths with Rule. This is it. I wonder if the position they're going to have him coach, outside linebackers, if that tells us that Nebraska is going to play a true 3-4. Now, I think players can play in any system in defense. Okay, you'll find a way to get guys to play in that defense, whatever you choose to do. But I think the more important thing is here in the trade to Florida State, where you traded 2 guys for 1 guy with a Florida State Seminole to be named later, maybe down the road. I'm just kidding. This is about recruiting, because you just lost 2 guys that are familiar with the state of Florida and the South. Nebraska had a class that was kind of built on in-state and the borders, but everyone on that staff will tell you that for Nebraska to get to where they want to go, they've got to be good in the South, and they've got to win some games in the South when it comes to recruiting. Mm-hmm. And you lose a guy like White, who knows the state of Florida, but even more so Terrence Knighton, who loves recruiting in Florida. I think it's important to get a guy who is very, very good at recruiting and knows that state. And I think he's he was very highly thought of when he was on the staff before he left, in terms of a guy that he could connect with his players. He could connect with that position group. So I think all those things are important. It's a nice addition for Nebraska to bring him back, because here's the other thing. Are we walking down the path, guys, of Rule knows what they have. He knows that they can't go 5'7", 6'6", 7'5". he doesn't want to shake things up drastically because there's a big shakeup on offense. He wants to kind of keep things the same on defense. So there's a little bit of familiarity, whether it be the man that moves from the back end to the front of the room as the DC, or a guy that some players are still familiar with that comes back.
Well, and that's what I thought was interesting here, Gary. Do you read into the fact at all, and I think you are based on what you're saying here, that Matt Rule is making defensive hires without having a full-time defensive coordinator in place? Because, I mean, I know not everyone's going to need to be Dana where they come in and they need full control over the offense and the offensive staff. Not everyone's going to be that defensively. But I thought it's interesting that, though not officially announced, we've heard enough, like this is going to be a hire that's being made on the defensive side of the ball without the insight of whoever your defensive coordinator is going to be next season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Elijah. I wonder also, again, look at the hires by Rule on defense compared to the hires on offense. He has said this, offense really isn't his forte, so that's why he hired the head coach of the offense in Holgerson. He did, when he hired Tony White, Rule, White wasn't able to really bring his staff. He brought some behind the scenes guys, but when Tony White got here, most of the guys were already in place. A Knighton, a Dvorak, and Cooper from their past relationship with Rule. So he's doing that again. But to your point, Elijah, I think we're in agreement here that it kind of feels like Rule's making the hires, but maybe he's already able to run that past the defensive coordinator, because maybe one of the points of contention this past year is you didn't run the defensive back coach hire through your defensive coordinator before last season started.
Yeah, you need a voice in that, but Rule, no doubt, is saying this is what I want defensively. This is who I feel will help defensively. You run it how I want it. I'm the head guy, and we'll see where they go. I'm going to go into Frank Oakham here because he's a name I've looked at. He's a name you've mentioned quite a bit, Gary, and he was All-American defensive tackle on those Vince Young Texas teams, and then played for Rule. And is
also,
a guy.
he played. Kraynak knows him. He played with the Omaha
Nighthawks. The Nighthawks. He's a teammate of our buddy Jay Moore. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
and he might have been
too, by the way.
Yeah, and he might have been probably phone call number one if he wasn't coaching for Vegas when Rule got here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's connect the dots a little.
Yeah, and he's been at Toledo, so he stayed in the college game. He's very highly thought of by Rule. Like Rule has, and this is the big thing with Matt Rule. He likes to hire coaches, develop coaches, and then have them move on. And especially if they're former players, whether they played for him or they played for him in the league, he likes that. That's a big thing for him. And if I'm thinking about what Nebraska needs on that defensive line, and, you got two good starting pieces in Riley Van Poppel and Keona Davis, and then whatever falls after them. Frank Oakham kind of fits that. He's kind of like the Terrence Knighton. He's got the same kind of personality. He's got a little bit of dog in him. He's got some swag, and I think that's what you need. You can't go from Terrence Knighton to a very mealy-mouthed defensive line coach. You got to have a defensive line coach that when the head coach gets at you, he gets right back at you. And so that's a name that I looked at right away. And I would think if we make the connections and connect the dots, so to speak, with Rule's hires, that would fall in line with somebody who has to be near the front of your defensive line possibilities.
It's funny, though, because you talk about defensive line coaches. I don't think of any of them as having a small personality, being guys that are going to be mousy and keep to themselves. Like that's something about that position group. The defensive line coaches always seem to be a little larger than life.
Oh, we remember Hank Hughes.
Oh, God. I'll never forgive him for the Noah Fant fiasco. Thank God.
Yeah. You learn, and sometimes you correct those mistakes, and sometimes you keep making them.
As Noah scores again at Memorial Stadium on a frigid Friday.
In-state kids, like you guys mentioned Davion Hall earlier. I don't think he ever should have come to Nebraska.
Just because he sort of peaked out when he was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah. You know what? And his commitment actually surprised Nebraska. Yeah. Nebraska was not ready for him to commit when he did. And they were like, okay. And he never really took off after his sophomore year, and it's unfortunate. And we'll see if he goes somewhere and they can find the key to getting him to get back, because his freshman and sophomore year under Coach Huffman at Bellevue West, he was a dude. You'd be like, that's a no-brainer. Nebraska's got to have that guy. The last 2 years, it wasn't necessarily, he wasn't doing the things you needed to be at the top of the list, but he was so athletically gifted. People went, man, look at that guy go. But he found out the reality of college football, man. You got to work. You got to put in the work, or you're going to get passed up. And so I think instead of sticking around, he's one of those that in the cut down to 105 makes sense. And I hope he goes somewhere and he can get back to playing like he did as a freshman and sophomore in high school, because he was a baller. Last 2 years, not so good. This year, kind of hit or miss. Well, on the other hand, Isaiah McMorris made some good strides at wide receiver. He was swimming in it early, but I heard a lot of positive things in October, November about him on the scout team. Like he's a guy that, he might get it and he might be okay.
So with all the volatility on the coaching staff, let's not even talk about the players right now, but like just on the coaching staff, if you look at Rule's inaugural staff that he brings in compared to what he's going to roll out with in 2025, it's going to be significant change on that staff. Do you give him a mulligan for recognizing that there needed to be changes, or are you concerned that he kind of did that in the first place and that discord seemed to be prevalent throughout this year, stressing him out? The guy looked like Coach Rule looked like a different dude from like halfway through the season through the end of the year. And just with the amount of chirping and the amount of coaches that are leaving, going to other programs, is there trouble in paradise that we're ignoring here, or is this just part of the process of Rule? Yeah, maybe getting a mulligan, realizing what he needs, and doing what's necessary to get this thing right.
I think where he came from, I think it would be different if Nebraska hired him from Baylor, but they hired him from the NFL. And I think probably when he had a discussion with Trev's like, we got to get this thing going right away. And so Rule is probably like, okay, I know this guy. They've worked with me before. They know what I want. They know that I'm a grinder, that we're going to put in the hours. But we can't have any hesitation, because we also have to finish up a recruiting class. So I'm wondering if that played into it. I do give him credit, because then you realize that guys are not the right fit, or they can't win in the Big Ten. The Big Ten's a different beast. It's not just the OCs, DCs, and head coach. Man, the Big Ten has some really good football coaches, period. And so realizing that. But there is one thing here. He got bailed out by Holgorsen, because has Dana Holgorsen not changed your optimism about next year? Like if there was no Holgorsen and there was still Satterfield with Rule, are you optimistic about next year off of 6-6? But they hire Holgorsen, and it's changed the optimism about what could happen next year. So he makes that decision, or that decision was like, okay, we only have one choice. You turn it over to him, and now there's like a different vibe on offense. I know some guys, Emmett Johnson jumping into the portal, people went, whoa. But Holgorsen hires a wide receiver coach, and you're like, okay, here we go. I'll give him a little bit of a mulligan overall. But, man, his offensive staff, the original hires, probably not in the right place. But as Schmidt has mentioned, Mark, you've mentioned, Elijah has mentioned, when you go back and look at how they were trying to put together the original staff, how does this staff look different if Jake Peetz says yes? Are more coaches in the right position to coach than Garrett McGuire should have never been a wide receiver coach? No. Probably Garrett McGuire should have. Nebraska can't be a place where it's first year position coach. It just can't. Yeah. This is not a training ground, okay? But if you're going to hire Garrett McGuire, probably back to those days 2 years ago, his most ideal position would have been at quarterback. But Jake Peetz, they can't reel him in. They had some other guys that they just was not, they couldn't get here. So then you have guys you've committed to, and you have to rearrange them. So probably in that first year, and even into the second, there are guys in positions, whether it be a coordinator or a wide receiver coach, that's not their wheelhouse.
Well, and to kind of look back at what you just laid out, you had all right, if everything goes to plan, here's who I want. Guys are in their proper spot, or you've got Garrett helping with quarterbacks under Pete's versus go coach wideouts.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't have Sat as your plan B offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And Glenn Thomas, is brought in a year earlier. I mean, ideally, you get it done last January, and you get Dana here with Tony White, and
But
then this year a whole different deal.
Yeah. One of the things why Dana did not come here last January, timing and everything, is I think he looked at the offensive staff and said, I don't think I'm a fit with those guys.
It ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna work.
And now that the contract has been signed, Gary, no concerns about you with Dana and all the drama going down in Stillwater with Mike Gundy, where some people say he's fired. Sounds like he's not. Sounds like they're still in a dispute about him taking a discounted contract. No concerns there for you?
Well, I just saw Pete Thamel on game day, and he made it sound like, even though there is the Stillwater standoff, which I'm waiting for Billy Bob Thornton to come out from Landman, or Leonard DiCaprio. I think Stillwater was a good movie. People kind of knocked it. I thought it was an okay movie. I think this is the case at Stillwater. This is more than wins and losses off a bad year. It's somebody that has gotten sideways with him. But Pete Thamel made it appear that they're getting closer to putting together a deal that takes care of both parties. But that's a legitimate concern. I would like this. I think this is what sucks in the portal era, is Dana made a 2-year commitment for a reason. Who's got 2 years left? His quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I know this, to me, I would like to see this because you never know what guys are thinking, and there's all kinds of dabbling through agents and family. I would like to see his quarterback come out and make a public statement, or when they get into bowl prep and he starts in press conferences, just say, hey, man, I can't wait. I'm committed to Dana. Maybe you don't need that. I kind of do, because you never know. You never know.
Feel soothing, wouldn't it?
But the whole process is kind of fascinating, where maybe this is an insight into Rule getting squeezed after the UCLA game that introduces us to Dana Holgorsen. Is Holgorsen wanted a 2-year deal, but he wanted full control of the offense, from the scheme to the players to the staff. And if you are, as a lot of coaches are, control freaks, you're like, oh, no, my ass is on the line. I'm not going to let you do that. Rule said and I term this head coach of the offense, but signing a 2-year deal is important, because that would be the run. If they get Dylan to the NFL, Dylan's got 2 more years left, and then he is out before his senior year. So I think the 2 years are important. But I also think it's important on the way they approach guys they're going to go after, whether they be staff members or coaches. Because doesn't it also seem on offense, guys, that if you look at the Mills and the Mosey that are coming in, that wide receiver, even though I think Nebraska will still run the ball a really good amount, and not the air raid, but they will run the ball. Doesn't it seem like wide receiver is going to be the position at Nebraska moving forward?
Some glamour, yes, will be attached to it.
I like that word.
Because you're not only going to have balls to catch, but it'll look fun, right? And I think Dana will bring that other F word we like.
DGAF.
Yeah, right. He'll bring that fun, that glamour. It'll be sexy to play ball at Nebraska on offense.
But now the big question, Mark and Elijah, can Nebraska find a NFL draftable running back?
Yes.
Ahmad Hardy. That's the big name right now. Yeah. Ahmad Hardy. That's the big name. Louisiana Monroe, running back, 1,000-yard guy, somehow connected to, I don't know.
Give me the 5'11" kid out of Houston that Dana recruited.
What is Genty doing in Boise?
I said Nathan reached out to me yesterday and was like, well, why doesn't Nebraska just go play Genty? He's still got a year left of eligibility. And I'm like, well, something tells me that NFL money is a little bit more valuable than NIL money. But hey, I guess never say never, even though Genty's probably a first-round pick and there's no first-round NFL running backs that ever happen anymore. I mean, when was the last one? Saquon?
Yeah, probably.
Top running back drafted?
You had one drafted 2 or 3 years ago, I think.
But can Nebraska just get
you get Bijan. I just get Bijan.
Can Nebraska just get one, please?
I know. Like a complete back. A complete good running back. Mm-hmm. That'd be good. That'd be good.
Well, let me ask you the question, Gary, because the Marcus Satterfield offense wanted a downhill power running back. That's where Dowdell kind of comes from, a guy who's willing to, as Marshawn Lynch say, run through a man's face. What does, in your opinion, Dana Holgorsen want from the running back position offensively? Do you look scat back, receiving back? Like, what is the Dana Holgorsen ideal running back?
I think it's Emmett Johnson.
Oh,
right.
If you look at the last 3 games, which, again, I mean, let's just watch the Emmett Johnson thing unfold. Let's, and see where that goes as it plays out. But I think ideally you'd want that guy because he ran the ball 44 times, caught the ball 19 times in his last 3 games. I think that's the ideal scenario for a running back at Nebraska. In this kind of an offense to be able to do multiple things. And then also, there's a part of what Holgorsen wants, but how about the running backs being running backs better? The vision is better, reading blocks, that kind of stuff. So I think that is all encompassing, but I think the Emmett Johnson last 3 games, which, probably increased his value to some that are outside of Nebraska, shouldn't decrease his value if you were looking at Nebraska because he had a good 3 games. I think that's what you kind of want moving forward is that kind of guy. I mean, Savion Morrison is in the portal.
Yeah, I saw that from Kansas. Yeah.
But guys, there actually may be 2 guys in particular, one that's here and one that's coming that fits that role. Mekhi Nelson's going to play next year. They really like him. They just, he was a late addition. They had to get him up physically, but coaches reference him a lot. And then Parker. Parker is that kind of guy that if I'm looking at a Holgorsen offense with running backs that have done things in his offense, that's the guy they just got in this recruiting class. And then Dowdell is your bruiser because I don't think his style is going to change to where he's that scat back. So, I think with the news of Emmett Johnson, I think Nebraska looks at the running back room and they feel like they can get the right guys, and maybe they think they can plug and play running backs.
You had a top 50 defense and a, lower 50 offense, I guess you could call it.
Bottom 50?
Bottom 50 offense.
Bottom 20 maybe?
Yeah, you had a top 50 defense, bottom 50 offense. Does that flip next year based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, hey, Mark, Elijah and I talked about this on the Average Joe Sports Show pod, and Elijah brought up a good point, and I agreed with him. It could be switcheroo in 2025, where Nebraska could win games 35-28, and we don't bat an eye.
Well, I think I've brought this up multiple times. I think you look at how Fred Hoiberg changed up what he did with Nebraska basketball after year 2, and I think it could be a similar type offseason for Nebraska football, where you look back and say, well, what we're doing, our vision, it's not working. Let's recalibrate and see what we need to do. And I think what you need to do is you look at the college football playoff teams, none of them are in there with a bad offense.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're going to make the transition here. Nebraska's finally going to play college offense. I thought Satterfield's offense was time of possession. If you score 13, maybe you win 13-10. I don't know. His offense was geared to score points. Holgorsen's offense is geared to score points. Now you're going to have to, if all of a sudden, Nebraska scores a lot and they're going and they have tempo and, the defense is on the field for more plays than they were last year. I mean, they only defended last Friday night, 41 plays. Did Iowa only run 41 plays? You're going to have to marry the offensive ideology with the defensive ideology, but it wouldn't surprise me in 2025 if Nebraska is known for their offense, which, might sound crazy. They didn't score in the second half against Iowa, but if you look at the elements and look at Holgorsen, there's not a time where his offense hasn't scored, Well,
and that's, to me, in the modern football as well, and I don't know. I know it's still defense wins championships, but you can make your defense look better than it is by playing with a lead, playing up 2 scores in the third quarter, making teams feel the pressure of needing to come from behind. You can make your defense look better than it is through that. And I think that's kind of evidenced by some of the college football playoff teams where, yeah, they have great stop rates, but it also helps whenever you know the offense or the opposing offense has to go air it out and come from behind 2 scores, and they know, hey, this drive can't end in a field goal. It's got to be a touchdown because we need points. Like, I don't know. I think the high flying offense can help out your defense and make it look better than it is.
I absolutely. I agree. People in the stream we're all on the same page here. And also think about all these close games where you have to come from behind. Nebraska hasn't had an offense, especially the last 2 years, where you had confidence that they could come from behind because they could score just like that. Now you're gonna have to change your philosophy and go, wow, I mean, Nebraska they'll have it built, whether it be the personnel or just the simple scheme where they can get down the field and get in position to win some of those 1-score games.
As we sit here today, and Nebraska, this isn't unique to Nebraska. You look at Kentucky's roster, you look at plenty of rosters are having all kinds of dudes enter the portal. But there are some clear glaring needs, whether it be portal or graduation. Of all the position groups for Nebraska, offense or defense, which one do you think probably won't be right come next year? It's just hard to imagine that all position groups are going to be well fortified and ready to roll, right? It just seems like that's just a lot of dudes to get right. You better bat 1,000 if they're all going to be right. Which position group has you sort of most concerned in terms of being Big Ten elite or close to it next year?
Linebacker. Yeah. And a little bit of it is they're going to be young. I mean, there's going to be a lot of new faces that are going to be playing at linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nebraska's, I tallied it up. I believe Nebraska's off-ball linebackers, so not your pass rushers, just the guys that are playing off-ball. I think they combine all of them all together for a total of 15 tackles. Of those, I believe 10 came on the defense and the other 5 came on special teams. Like, that's how thin you're looking at linebacker right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, 8 of those 15 come from Chambers.
You know, Dawson Merritt, Christian Jones, those guys could play soon. You know, it's going to be, whether Tony White stayed or not, it's going to be a younger defense, but it's going to be a faster defense. You know, it might be a defense that tackles better in space because you're making the transition from some guys that, you know, they kind of fit the defense to them, whether it be a Gifford on the back end or up front with Robinson and Nash. That's why I think John Butler has a leg up, because of his familiarity with the personnel. Because they're gonna have to hit the ground running with defense. I mean, they can't. Do you really want to start over and teach people a whole new defense again?
Well, it actually worked out okay for Tony White, right? Like, he was able to get production pretty quickly. You can do it. You can. I don't know if you want to.
I think, but I think the bigger question will be when they decide who the defensive coordinator is. And that person, by the way, that person has to be able to stand up in front of the room of the defensive guys and command respect. Okay? Has to be the leader of that entire defense, where people are like, yep, I know what you're doing. I like playing in this defense. Man, this is a good vibe. More so than I think on offense with the OC when he's in the all offensive room. I think the defensive coordinator has to exude confidence, where guys are like nodding in agreement while they're sitting in their chairs. But we don't know this until the hire is made. But will this be Matt Rule's defense, or will it be the new defensive coordinator on the philosophy? Because I think if you look at the way they changed the defense last year to less attacking and what they did in the back end with quarters coverage, you know, I mean, that was kind of a Rule philosophy. Was that a Rule philosophy that matched with John Butler but didn't match with Tony White?
Yeah. So, okay. If you had to put money on it right now,
mm-hmm.
Is Butler the next DC?
I would say so, and I bet Phil Snow in a mentor role is somewhere still in the program.
That's also kind of where I'm at, though. I would say I would not bet the house on it. It'd be where my money is at right now, though.
So they have had feelers out.
Yep.
But I think John Butler probably was not promised something when he came here, but I think it was the understanding that he'd get first crack at being the defensive coordinator.
With Bayer, Butler, Uman Mielen, Kai Wallen, Williams, all those folks transferring out during the bowl game. Who are some new names that we're going to see that maybe we haven't seen a whole lot of that have just been kind of marinating in the program in the background?
Well, I think, you know what, Mark, that's a valid question. While we sit in an outdoor press box and freeze for 3.5 hours at Yankee Stadium against Syracuse. Whoa, Kyle McCord against Dylan Raiola. Wouldn't that be great? I think you will see what'll be the cornerstones of the program. The McGahees, the Shavers, those kind of guys are going to get a lot of play time in the bowl game. I think it won't be a wrap to 24 on defense. It'll kind of be, hey, this is the start of 25. Because if you have John Butler running the defense, isn't that ideal?
Yeah, it is. But if they get blown out by 30,
well, and as Mike
you're
says,
like, John Butler, new DC. How's that going to go?
As Mike says here in the stream, it's Butler's audition. That's kind of where I'm at.
I know. But what if they blow it, right? What if they get lit up and then you're announcing Butler as the DC?
Well, hey, in this
fan base?
Mark, in this current climate, it'll be, well, they have the football PTSD. Get those seniors' ass out of here.
Yeah. Huh. Crazy times, man.
Gary, as we wind it down here, I do want to quickly say some exciting changes coming for you on Monday. I don't want to completely turn it over to you, but hey, you're with us every single Saturday. We'll say, hey, it's going to be exciting for you on Monday with your show.
I was going to say, I'm in California. I haven't found out I don't get to come back for a job. Yes, on Monday morning on the station that I'm employed at, 1620, we have a brand new morning show. I'm excited for Matt McMaster, who is is somebody that graduated from Nebraska last May, who I think is going to be a star in this business. And so he'll be joining me in the mornings for Gary and Matt.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Check my mixtape for when that, because if he enters the portal at some point, he might, right? Young guy, he's going to be coveted. Just check it out. Check it out. Just give it a listen.
I will. I mean,
it's 24 hours long, and so you can just have it in all day. It's just nothing but takes.
Nebraska today against Michigan State. Close, blowout, upset.
I'm seeing the line is Michigan State 6.5. Is that correct?
Yes.
How's Frankie doing? I haven't kept up too much. You doing all right?
Okay, so he's on the front page of their program. Okay. He's the cover of the program. And so I took a screenshot of it and sent it to him, and he just responded here about 20 minutes ago. I imagine he got up. He's making a transition. He was the guy in Omaha. He got taken out of the starting lineup. I mean, he loves it there. He loves Izzo. That's a big reason why he went there. But he's getting into double figures. Yeah. It's going to be tough for Nebraska today, but if they go in, I just don't want like Wisconsin last year, when they just got routed, when you were feeling good about them. I think they go in there and they play Michigan State tough, and it's a whole different animal when you're on the road in the Breslin Center. Berkay going to need, whatever he's going to give you today if he's in or he's out, and how many minutes he gives. But I actually think Nebraska's toughness and their kind of fortitude of not riding the roller coaster will help them today. But when you're on the road, man, make or miss sport, you got to hit some shots. Tell KU that. When they came into Omaha the other night, Creighton hit shots, Kansas did. Nebraska needs a Season and Williams and Gary, guys to hit shots, whether they are behind the arc or in front of the arc. And if they do that and they hang in the game for a while, if they get to the under 8 media timeout in the second half and it's still a close game where Nebraska has a chance, man, I start to like Nebraska's chances. But they can't get blown away right away where they're down 15 and they're scrambling the whole game.
Gary, covering UNO, it's limited in terms of how often you can see Nebraska in person. Have you seen Nebraska in person yet this year?
I saw their last 2 games.
Is it just me, or is a physically very impressive team? Like when you see them at floor level, you're just like, wow, that is a big physical group. They're mature. You got some young pieces. I see Nebraska as capable of winning almost any game they're in, right? I just feel like they have such overwhelming size, and then just enough skill within it, and a lot of crafty players. I mean, Williams, crafty. Worcester, super crafty. Gary, same way. Morgan, Youngton, it just feels like the basketball IQ is super high. The size is really good. Maybe not as athletic as you want to be, but with Bryce.
But with that said, they don't try and be something they're not.
Mm-mm. Well, and Bryce Williams slimmed himself down. I mean, he's unrecognizable compared to last year.
He just shaved the beard. That's all it is.
No, he looks like he dropped about 30 pounds. He's very different than he looked last year.
I don't know. If you shaved your beard, you might look
skinnier. I did shave my beard.
I know, and we were all like, who is that guy?
Yeah. I know. I was still fat. I just had a beard that was smaller. But either way, it's just out of all the, I guess it's what gives me hope about what Elijah is saying about what Matt Rule could do about sort of remaking the roster, remaking how you want to roll. If this is how Nebraska is going to roll under Hoiberg, you got a puncher's chance in every game.
Hey, to wrap it up, to tie into what Elijah has said about Rule, this is where Fred changed. He got squeezed by his AD, who said, "You gotta drop the Abdel Massi guy. He's bad news, bad for the program."
Yeah.
That forced Fred to say, "You know what? My style from Iowa State will not work here. To win in the Big Ten, we got to guard people. We got to get after people." And so, he got rid of a toxic locker room. He got more team-oriented guys. They became more defensive-oriented. They didn't try and do something they're not doing. Look at Rule. After UCLA, he got squeezed because it was the first time that he looked in the mirror and he said, "Man, people here are doubting me." And all of a sudden, he started to make changes. Fred has then taken that, and I think Fred has become a better in-game coach, more accountability on the floor, better decisions out of timeouts, which he had been good at. But, his first couple of years, you're like, what do they do in the timeout? Do they play rock, paper, scissors? What does, and I don't want to say a panicked or a squeezed Matt Rule, but what does a head coach at Nebraska do that have these long contracts when Hoiberg can go, "Hey, I have a 5-year deal. It's only year one. We still got a couple more years." But then they say with the mentality, "I'm on a 1-year deal." That's how I think Matt Rule is right now. And that's okay because there's a sense of urgency across the board. I thought Rule, hey, I got 7 years. I know the plan. We're going to stick to the process. I got year 1 of 7. Then I got year 2 of 7. And then now he's going, "You know what? I'm operating on a 1-year contract." That's not true, but I'm operating on a 1-year contract where we got to get this to where we want it. And so we don't have these tough conversations.
And one more thing to add to that conversation that Hoiberg did, started nailing his portal evaluations.
Yes, with Hoiberg.
Yeah, started nailing. I mean, you look at Bryce Williams, Jawan Gary, like 2 guys especially that led the way. Started really locking down on what guys we're going to bring to the floor for you.
Elijah, great point, because then don't you think Hoiberg said, "I need to find guys for our program, not for, hey, here we have a guy."
Yeah.
Like they were more
talented.
They were more selective. That's why some of the names that are trickling out. There's a linebacker from Fresno State that's going to visit next week.
His name's Phoenix something.
Phoenix Johnson, who, if I'm reading his stats right, averaged 25 tackles a game.
What?
Jesus, how bad was Fresno State?
Let me fire up the old
I saw a tweet from somebody yesterday that said, "Man, this guy is a tackling machine." But I'll be curious, the first 2 years, not so great for Nebraska in the portal. Are they more selective on what the team needs instead of just, hey, this is a guy? And we're, and Holgerson said the other day, hey, we're going to be 20 to 30 visits. Rule says we'd probably add 15 guys. I also think one other thing, I want to point something out. My one thing, and then we do have to run. Nebraska has missed out on 85 practices, guys, since they last went to a bowl game. 85 practices. That is essentially a whole season of practices. So they're practicing now. They'll ramp it up more next week. You're going to be able to have portal guys on campus that are going to see you practice. I think that's a key thing for a portal guy. Maybe they don't get into that, and they're more into, let's have the conversation about NIL. Let's have the conversation about depth chart. But they go at them hard in practice. portal guys will be able to stand on the sidelines and go, man, is that for me or not for me?
Well, that's what I was gonna. That's kind of what I was getting at with Fred Hoiberg with his portal evaluations. Is I think Matt Rule, his style, he wants the guys that are fired up about what Nebraska does at practice. Obviously, you're going to need the money to match up with the value, but he's going to need those guys that see how Nebraska practices and goes, that is for me.
Yep. They need to find more guys that love football.
Yes.
Yeah, I just looked up this linebacker. So he had 101 tackles over the last few years. 101 tackles, 5 sacks, 3 picks over the last 4 seasons. But he graded a 90.3 on Pro Football Focus in coverage. That's like one of his strong suits. That's a very high number. If you follow Pro Football Focus numbers, Nebraska generally was like in the mid 60s to low 70s. So that's very good if you can get some sort of coverage linebacker out of Fresno State. Not bad. Not bad.
Well, seems like a good place to wrap things up, Gary.
Thank you. It's the sun is coming up in California.
Well, enjoy your time out there. And a reminder, we'll talk to you tomorrow, 6 p.m., the Average Joe Sports Show live edition.
What part of California are you in?
I'm in the capital city. I'm in Sacramento.
Nice.
I'm in Sacktown. The beam, the Kings won last night, and the beam was lighting. Yeah, the beam was lighting up the city.
Are you going to do In-N-Out or Jollibee or anything like that?
There's, you know what? Because I had enough Whataburger, my favorite in Vegas. I have not been to a Jack in the Box in a long time, and there's one across the street.
Perfect.
Okay.
Get on it. Get on it.
Well, Gary, enjoy your time out there. Appreciate you.
Thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 6 on the pod. And Mark, I think you're going to be busy with some names that are attached to Nebraska in the portal over the next week. Not leaving, but that might be coming for a visit. I expect next Saturday, do you have like the CVS receipt of guys that Nebraska has an interest in?
I'll send you all texts as it happens.
One quick thing. One final thing.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Does Nebraska need a mid-tier portal quarterback?
Thank you. I was going to go there, but then it was like, we got to go. But look at Nebraska. So Harburg had been practicing at some other positions. It's pretty clear that he's not going to be a fit for Holgerson's offense, right? Just seems pretty obvious as a quarterback. If he elects to stay, do you have to keep him there though? Because you have Jalen Gramstad, you're not sure if he's going to come back, and you signed TJ Lateef, who's going to be a true freshman. Who knows what his fit is with Holgerson's offense? Don't really know.
Really good. It's
going to be good. Okay. Well, there you go. But if you go into 2025 with Harburg kind of being that tweener position wise, don't know if Gramstad's coming back, and you bring in Lateef, you're talking when it's like 2 quarterbacks, right?
Yes.
Like that's not quite enough.
They need a quarterback that Dylan Raiola believes is real competition. I don't think he thinks Harburg's real competition.
Could Lateef be that guy though?
I don't think so, but a mid-tier, actually, I'm just throwing this name out there, and it's not because I'm using him as an example. A Chubba Purdy type guy would actually be a nice addition for Nebraska. An older guy that knows the landscape. You're kind of here to be a mentor. If you get an opportunity, it's yours. We want you to compete, but you know the landscape coming in. You're at the end of your career. We just paid a freshman quarterback from Bellevue West a lot of money for 1 year of loyalty. We'll do the same thing for you, because I think they need to have competition in the spring at quarterback. And you know what? Competition at quarterback where you don't have to go through channels to say, hey, we're going to add this guy. Nebraska's got to protect themselves.
If you don't have that level of competition, doesn't Holgerson almost make up for that with how hard he'll coach?
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is that it's one thing to need a guy like that. It's another thing to go find a guy like that. And I think I said this on the Average Joe Sports Show, where it's just like, you got to find a guy that, you know what, is willing to come be a backup, has given up on their NFL dreams, doesn't care if their family sees them on the field. And at the quarterback position, that's hard to go do.
Yep.
Or you have to find some guy with so much unwavering self-belief that he thinks they're going to beat out Dylan Raiola in a quarterback competition.
And then doesn't cry about it when he doesn't.
Yeah.
That's part of the vetting process. But they need another quarterback in that room, as they allow Harburg to do things that would help his stock in the NFL that are not QB1. I know Kobe said I'm sleeping on TJ Lateef. I like Lateef. I think he's got the We're talking about a freshman quarterback coming into college, and we just saw a freshman quarterback deal with the ups and downs of college. So he's going to be in the mix, and I like him for the future if they can keep him here. But I don't want him playing this upcoming year. I don't want him burning a year of eligibility for somebody else if he doesn't stay. Get him in, develop him, give him a chance. But they need another guy in that room. Competition is always good, and I think anything to keep driving Dylan to where he wants to be is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, another beautifully executed one more thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hey, have fun. Enjoy today. Good sports day. Maybe it'll be quiet. And then tomorrow we can talk about going to the Pinstripe Bowl, going to New York City.
Oof, against Boston College, just like they write.
No, I saw Syracuse today.
Is it Syracuse now? Yeah.
That's Kyle McCord against Raiola, Fran Brown against Matt Rule, Elijah Robinson. Remember when Nebraska tried to get him from Texas A&M?
Yeah.
He's now at Syracuse. I mean,
yeah. Tony White being the thing in common.
Exactly.
Being burned by Tony White.
Yeah, exactly. The Tony White leftover bowl. Sloppy seconds bowl.
One of the biggest losers of Tony White moving from Lincoln, his son is going to be a really good football player and would have been a freshman in high school.
Class of 29.
Yeah. Why does Nebraska keep losing defensive coaches that have these sons that are really good football players?
It's dizzying, man. There's so many guys. That'd be great. We should play that one time. Just like name all the coaches that have been on staff in Nebraska since 2010. Go, and then you just see how many people you could come up with.
Didn't we do this one time? And there is one of the more obscure defensive back coaches for 1 year that people forget about.
Mark. Yeah. Mark had a whole slideshow.
Yes,
I already forgot the guy's name. I already forgot his name. God, he was a DB coach for it was like Brian White or something like that.
That was a great slideshow because Mark showed us their faces and was like, "Who is this man?" And everyone's like,
Okay, we need to do that in the off season. We'll play. Who is this guy?
Yeah. Oh man. And now you don't even have like a limit on coaches. So this is going to get even worse.
Yeah. Then we can play the game of who is this guy? He's currently on staff.
Yeah.
And then we can all go, "Oh my God, John Butler without a hat on? Holy cow!" He's got a man bun mullet.
All right, there he is, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us for Weekend Edition. Gary, appreciate you. Mark, appreciate you. Any big plans for your college football Saturday?
A little Christmas market shopping today.
Ooh,
it's going to be very special. But yeah, what time are the biggest games at? They're tonight, right?
We got Big 12 at 11 a.m. You have SEC, so Texas Georgia's at 3.
Yeah.
Big 10,
Texas Georgia again will be interesting. Georgia manhandled them.
Big 10, Oregon, Penn State's at 7, and then ACC, Clemson, SMU is at 7.
Are you buying? I don't know. I wouldn't rule out Penn State.
I don't rule out Penn State, but I do rule out James Franklin in a big game.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's
fair.
The problem.
The only time it's worked out for him is when they just did like YOLO bombs. That was his best year. That was all they did. Just they chucked it 60 yards downfield and it would work out occasionally and they'd win. That's how they did it.
We'll see.
Yeah.
College football.
But if Franklin gets fired, are they going to hire Rule? Oh my God.
There's no way James Franklin gets fired.
Yeah, okay. All right.
In my humble opinion. Now, Ryan Day, I also think will probably not be fired, but I think Ohio State fans may revolt this offseason.
If they get
bounced to that Michigan team.
Yeah, if they don't look that good in their playoff game, I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule that out at all. Yeah. But by the way, how can anybody be surprised, right? Like the likelihood of you following a legend and then somehow being better than him is zero. Like it's just the chances of that happening are none. It's same with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. It's like he's following Nick Saban. What, you thought there'd be no drop off? Like
following the legend in any sense is the worst job in sports.
Pretty much the only. I mean, you could say Devaney to Osborne, right? I guess that ended up working out, but it took a while.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't stay. You weren't winning national titles in 73, 74 and all that. Come on now.
Well,
I'll
that's
take Ryan Day. I'll take Ryan Day on the staff.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
On that note, I think that means it's time to end the show, Mark.
All right.
So Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, Schmidt had to run early. He'll be back on Monday, 4 to 6. That's when we'll be talking to you about a Husker Bowl destination, all the results of Championship Saturday. So join us Monday from 4 to 6 live on the air here on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel as well. That's when we'll talk to you again. For Mark Kraynak, Chris Schmidt, it's Elijah Herbel saying goodbye. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday.